Okay guys, let's get into this. So if you want to progress any further and remove the actual EGR valve and the intake manifold, this is where we're going. From here on in, the project does get difficult. There are a lot of bolts that need to be removed, and there's a lot of tight spaces. You'll need some sort of specialty tools. You can see here I'm first removing the high pressure fuel line, which runs down the side of the engine. This fuel line has to be removed because it actually blocks the screws you need to get to the EGR valve. It's a bit of messing around, but if you can locate the high pressure fuel line here, as you can see, you can slowly remove it and just move it out of the way, and then you'll have to get underneath the EGR valve and unplug the sensor wiring. You can see the plug there in yellow. There's actually two plugs that need to be undone, which is under the EGR valve, and by removing those you can get to the bolts to remove the EGR. There's 4 bolts you need to get to under the EGR valve. I'm just showing a shot of the carbon buildup. It's very difficult to get under the EGR valve. I'll say this again, it's probably the toughest part of the job. There's the 2 plugs that exist under the EGR valve you have to get removed. And just put them aside, put them out of the way. They'll do no harm. So the next task is, once you've removed the 4 bolts, the EGR will come free. There's 1 vacuum line at the back of the EGR that needs to be pulled off, but apart from that it should wriggle free. You can see how much of a tight fit it is. It's just in there so tight. It's so difficult to remove. But once you've got it out, you've got that hurdle out of the way, and then you can start cleaning it down. So that's the EGR valve removed once you can get to the 4 bolts underneath. Please watch my other videos to see how to get to this point. You can just see the back of the EGR where the vacuum line is attached. Now, if you want to progress further and remove the intake manifold, this is the rest of the video. So we've got to start dismantling the fuel filter carrier and the top of the engine section. So I'm just showing here the side of the engine where the bolts are, and just the location of where the EGR valve was. That's where it was attached to, and you can see the 4 mounting bolt places. You'll need to renew that gasket if you like to. It's a metal gasket. And now we're going to start working on the brackets here to remove the intake manifold. So the first supporting bracket needs to be removed. That's just 2 bolts. It's pretty straightforward. It is a bit of a tight fit, but you should manage that quite easily. And you can see there that I've removed the high pressure fuel line, and I've made a bit of room by removing the EGR valve also. So we need to remove the fuel filter canister and the fuel filter support. So it's where I've got the socket mounted in there. There's 3 bolts at least that need to be removed, and other connecting hoses, coolant hoses and return hoses. You'll see that it's just one large plastic piece, and it's bolted to the block of the engine. You can see the heater hose, the coolant hose is still attached there, and it's still all plastic one piece. But once you remove it, you can see there that it's bolted straight to the side of the engine block, and there is a rubber gasket seal that seals the plastic housing up against the aluminium engine block there. So that's out of the way. You've got the fuel filter carrier out of the way, and the next thing to tackle is the 8 bolts that secure the intake manifold. So those 8 bolts, they're pretty tough to get to, but once you get them, you can wriggle the entire intake manifold out of the way, and that's pretty much it, guys. It comes off in one piece, and it's actually pretty easy to remove. You can see the 8 bolts, 4 in the top and 4 at the bottom. What I first noticed is mine is actually pretty clean, because I've tried to clean it beforehand, but the whole thing is just covered in black sludge, and you can see the intake manifold section there where the housing is. It's just completely black. It's like there's black death, there's black sludge all over the entire thing. So you can see I've got all those bits and pieces, the EGR valve, the intake manifold, and the fuel filter carrier. I've just got another shot here of the engine block and how black and built up with soot it is. The entire thing is just disgusting. It all needs to be cleaned out, and you need some good parts cleaner. So I've attempted to start to clean out the intake section, remove all the black soot, and now is a perfect time to do the glow plugs. You can see all 4 glow plugs are right there. If you want to service the glow plugs, now's the time to do it. At least I actually did pull mine out and give them a good clean also. I did replace the glow plugs beforehand, but now is a good time to service the glow plugs and clean out the glow plugs channel, because again, that's all built up with black soot. And again, I'm just showing the intake section and how you need to clean it out. So these are the products that I used. It's just a general parts cleaner and the diesel intake decarb by Liqui-Moly. There's the intake manifold. Again, I haven't cleaned that yet. The EGR valve and the gaskets. There's a few parts that you'll need to replace the gaskets. And at this point, you just want to clean everything. Clean the black soot and the black carbon out of everything, because it'll be built up everywhere. It's disgusting. So all that will need to be cleaned, the EGR valve and the housing. You can replace the gaskets there, clean the entire EGR valve. All the mating surfaces where gaskets are need to be cleaned. You can see that copper wire there. I broke the top of it, and I've just repaired it temporarily with copper wire. Again, there's the parts cleaner. There's some extra gaskets. There was a few gaskets in the gasket kit. I couldn't find what parts they're for. Maybe those gaskets are left over for the high pressure fuel pump. I'm actually not too sure, but those gaskets have nothing to do with the EGR valve or the intake manifold. So that's an inside view of the intake manifold. It's absolutely built up with black soot. All that needs to be cleaned and flushed out. Luckily, it's actually pretty solid plastic, so you can just get in there very easily. Nothing's going to break. That's the intake manifold. The intake manifold comes apart. It's actually 2 sections, and you can quite easily pull it apart, get in there, clean everything out, and just get it looking like brand new. This is the actual second attempt I've had at cleaning it out, and as you can see, even after 2 attempts, it's so built up with black soot. So it's looking very good now. It's looking very clean. I've done the glow plugs. I've done the intake manifold section. I've got in the ports there, and I've sprayed product actually into the combustion chamber. The Liqui-Moly diesel intake carb cleaner. I've sprayed it into the induction section, and we've got it looking clean. So now let's reassemble everything. I've got a video here just with the torque wrench, because you got to remember your torque settings. When you put the intake manifold back on, remember to use the torque settings. I think it was 14 Newton meters. Here's just a shot of all the bolts that are pulled off. There must be at least 30. And they're the main tools that are used for this entire job. They're your best friends, those tools. I'm just putting the fuel filter carrier back on now. This is reassembly. So reassembly is just the reversal of removal. It's nothing crazy. It's actually, once you've got all the parts clean and you can put everything back on, I'm just putting the high pressure fuel line back on now. This takes a bit of messing around to get it into the right place, because it's a funny S-bend shape, but you'll eventually get it there. Just showing a quick shot of the glow plugs and how tight everything is. It really is a bit of a tight fitting job, but like I keep saying, make space for yourself, and it'll make it a lot easier in the long run. So once you can get everything clean back together, assembly is a lot quicker. I think the disassembly up to the point of the intake manifold, it took roughly 5 hours. That's for disassembly. It'll take roughly 4 or 5 hours to put everything back on again. So 10 hours for the entire job. I'm just showing the engine bay. I've just put the fuel filter back on. I've just got the EGR valve. I've reassembled it and put it back on. the reassembly of the EGR valve is very, very tough. Again, it's a very difficult job to do. The 4 bolts underneath the EGR valve, which hold it to the engine block, are so difficult to get to. I can't even get in there with the camera to show you. You're just going to have to get in there, right in the engine bay. Hopefully you've got some special tools or small hands or something to get in there, because I had to lay on top of the engine and climb in the engine bay to get it off. Okay, we've just assembled some more of the EGR valve and the cooler, the mixing chamber, the cooler. Remember those 6 bolts. Remember your torque wrench settings again. All these components, you should use the torque wrench to get them all up to spec. So I've just reassembled the top of the vacuum chamber. If you've labeled everything, it shouldn't be too hard. You should know where everything's going. You can see that I've used the yellow pen to label everything. I've replaced the hose clamps. Okay, so now I've basically put the coolant in, I've got everything ready. Let's try and fire up the engine. It's not going to start first time, don't hesitate. Don't be scared or anything like that. If the engine doesn't start first time, it's just going to kick over. Remember, there's no fuel in the fuel lines because you've removed it, and there's going to be a lot of gunk in the combustion chamber, but eventually the engine will start if you've put everything back together correctly, and it actually sounds quite good. So you can see that I've shortened the video. It's taken a few attempts, but the engine will fire up. Let's listen to it.